Alrighty, so welcome back to another episode of Insurance Toolkits podcast. We do one every week, and we've done so since probably April of this year. We appreciate each of you guys who watch, and today is a podcast that I'm genuinely excited to do. Not that I'm not excited for every other guest, but this is probably the biggest guest we've had yet. I joked last week about the season finale since we're at like the 24th episode, so I brought out the big gun for probably the 24th or 25th episode. We have on today John Kite from Equus, and I'll allow him to introduce himself and his agency. But again, he is our first integrity partner to be interviewed on the podcast as well. So John, why don't you take a moment, introduce yourself, and let folks know who they're tuning into today.
Hey, thank you, Chris, and excited to be on today. Excited that you reached out and invited me on. It's an honor. And my name is John Kite. My wife and I, Kim, we live part of the year in Raleigh, North Carolina, actually a little suburb north of Raleigh called Wake Forest, which we love. And then which is where I am today is St. Augustine Beach, Florida. So this is where we spend the other part of our year. And I actually drove down late last night. So if I look a little bit tired today, you'll have to excuse me. But you know, Chris, the name of our agency is the Cornerstone Group. We have built our business under the Equus umbrella, and very fortunate to be able to partner with Integrity Marketing Group, which has certainly been the highlight of our business life, and that's been an awesome partnership. Like I was just talking with you, we're just kind of a year and a half into that relationship. And just really excited about, you know, just at this phase of our life, just recommitting ourselves to this incredible industry.
Absolutely. I remember when we first started to bring Toolkit to the public, I wrote down the list, kind of like when New York Life tells you to write down your 500 friends and family to recruit to. I'm thinking, who do I know way up there in the stratosphere that I can bring this tool to? And Equus took a while, and I mean that in a good sense, because they value the products they put in front of their agents. They value the relationships they have in the industry, and they're not just going to sign up for some fly-by-night subscription. And I really value the relationship we had, even at a very basic level, to help this tool find its way into the hands of probably countless agents that work with you, right?
Yeah, it's been a difference maker for us. Matter of fact, I was talking to an agent last night on my way down, who was able to take care of a client. One of those clients that we all deal with that it's like, where do I go from here? And so using the agent toolkit proved to be successful for this agent. So thank you so much for bringing that to, all of Equus. We've all benefited from it.
Absolutely. So first question we have for you this morning, the characteristics of a potentially successful agent. Obviously, to partner with Integrity and build a large agency, you have to do a ton of building. So what would you find as characteristics of someone you think could be successful in this industry?
Well, I mean, the simple answer to your question is desire. Man, when I interview people, I try to be very, very honest with them about what our industry is. And even more than our industry, I try to be honest about what business ownership is, what the whole 1099 life is about. And I just let them know that in our industry, we typically have a lot of really good marketers, and they do a really good job of dressing up a business that is ebb and flow. Like it's all ebb and flow, and they tend to market only the flow. You know, I talk to them a lot about the ebbs, but the thing that I'm looking for above everything is desire. Another word that I use, which I don't know if it's a kooky word or not, but it's dream. You know, I want to find people. I'm looking for people that have that dream of something better. And a lot of times, Chris, it's maybe they've lived enough of life to know what they don't want. You know, I met a guy a long time ago, and he said at this stage of my career, it was the thing that made the most sense to me. He said, whenever you see people running, I always want you to think gold medals or German shepherds. And I looked at him like, what are you talking about? And he said, whenever you see somebody running, he said, the thing is that they're all running. He said, but some people, they run for gold medals. They run for the things that they're wanting to get, he said, but there's a lot of people out there that run from German Shepherds. So they know what they don't want in life. And so that makes them run it. And it made sense to me, Chris, because at that phase of my career, I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want a job. I knew I was never going to be successful in W-2. And so, man, I was running, and I was running fast toward what I didn't want.
Yeah, I tell a famous story prior to really finding myself in the insurance industry of realizing I wanted more than what I was getting out of my career in being a paramedic, which is a great career. Probably was my calling, but I was called to provide for my kids better. I went to the dollar store to do grocery shopping, and I did half my shopping in the store and half in the dollar store. And I bought this cheese and I put it in the microwave, and the dollar store cheese didn't melt. And I thought to myself, there's got to be something more than that. That's the desire for more, and then the drive to take it to the next level, which leads us to our next question perfectly. You have someone with talent, you have someone with drive, you have someone with desire. They get out and running, then they're selling and they're producing, but then you start to notice some red flags. As an agency owner and builder and manager, what would you say are some red flags that people should be aware of when they're looking at their agency below them?
Well, red flags, a couple of different things. Red flags of, I think, people that are positioning themselves to not make it. That number one red flag to me is people that don't plug in. Plugging in is huge. I'm not a rah-rah guy. I'm a self-image guy. But plugging in to an atmosphere that is designed to help you grow, because when you do face, and you will face the ebbs. In other words, the only thing anybody can ever promise you in this career is that you're going to have a hard time. Okay. So, people that don't plug in, man, I tell you what, it's just a huge red flag. Now from a crook standpoint, and everybody that builds an agency, they've always got to pay attention to that. Setting up algorithms inside your organization, because if you're going to build a big organization, you need to know the person that comes on, and within the first couple of weeks or couple of months, it seems like every policy they write is a $200 a month Mutual of Omaha policy, because they're going to advance on their controlled business. And so, when you start seeing some of that stuff, it's never a good thing.
Colton, I think it's the truth too in any business. If you were to unplug from working with Joe on a daily basis, I think he'd be concerned and wonder what's happening. So people on the independent producer side and the agency owner side, when we see an agent unplug from whatever system we're running, we start to worry about what they're doing and know that they're not on the path to success. Colton, when it comes
people, Chris, people die in isolation. Actually, I learned that from a good friend of mine, Roger Short, and I loved when he said it, and I've always given him credit for that. But people die in isolation. So when people do unplug, I've never seen anybody unplug from a good system and then launch from there and succeed.
That's an off question I didn't have on script this morning. What's a good system? I think there's a lot of really good systems. You've got one, I've got one. Many of organizations have one, but what would the characteristics of a good system be?
Well, and this is where I tend, and I think a lot of people in the industry would maybe refer to me as a kook, because I'm so I believe this wholeheartedly. To me, a good system is one that cares for 360 degrees of the agent. And here's what I know. It takes me about 90 days to transfer all of, and we've built our business really under mortgage protection. It takes me about 90 days to teach somebody mortgage protection, equity protection, critical time protection. In other words, it takes me 90 days to teach them really everything they need to know on how to be successful from a business standpoint. But the thing that you have to know is that I've never seen anybody outgrow their self-image. And so to me, the definition of a good system, a good upline, a good partner is somebody that is going to always be leading you and setting a great personal example on how you can be the very best person you could be. Because let's face it, I mean, if we're in this career, we're in this thing for the long haul, right? And so if we subscribe to the belief that our life, our business, our income, our business size is never going to outgrow our self-image. Sure, it might outgrow it temporarily, but it's always going to fall back to within our comfort zone and our self-image. And so, Chris, to me, the answer to that question is a good system is one that is going to provide you the tools and the motivation to be sure you're building yourself into the type of person that, number one, people want to do business with. And then number two, if you want to be an agency builder, type of person people want to be in business with.
Interesting. Colton, I think Linda Strong is about to lose her place as the best podcast we've ever done. What do you think?
Definitely. And I think to add on to that, it's kind of piggybacking off that very first point where you said they have to have a dream, they have to have the desire. You could say that in order, they have to have a dream that they have a desire to achieve. And I think kind of piggybacking off what you just said there, John, is a good system. When you start to see agents, especially in their first 6 to 12 months, start to unplug a little bit, being an agency owner myself, when you start to get ghosted a little bit, when you start to hear from them less and less, they don't respond to your texts as often, they're not in the group me's as often, you can see step by step that detachment. But I think what you guys both said, having a good system makes people want to stay connected. So when an agent comes in new and they have that initial burst of success, they make a little bit of money more than they've ever made before, they can start to really, really get those kickbacks, right? When you start to have the strongholds, when you start to get the door slammed in your face, when you get past those few weeks of that initial outburst of energy, I think a good system is what helps with the longevity. So I think that really, really is a great point that you brought up, because having an upline or a manager, so to speak, who cares about you from a 360-degree perspective, it makes the hard times a little bit less hard and the good times last a lot longer.
Exactly. Good point.
Next question for you this morning: establishing long-term relationships within your agency. I think one of the biggest observations I made of this industry is the churn from one group to the next. Man, I'm angry at Colton, I'm going to go work with John. Man, John was too honest with me, I'm going to go work with Joe. And people just go from one place to the next. And I'm guilty of that a little bit, but I also think there's growth in that as well. I also believe you're never going to grow big if you don't give yourself a chance to grow big. You could plant a seed, and if you pull that seed out, it's never going to become a tree. So, John, talk to us about establishing long-term relationships within your agency so that you've gotten long-term growth.
Yeah, those people that tend to jump, for the wrong reasons, they really do themselves a disservice. And hopefully, at some point in time in their career, they see that and they stop doing that. Like you mentioned, I mean, there's always proper times, and there's I was talking to somebody the other day, and I just said, where you're led into this industry, you're led there for a reason. And then sometimes, you learn what you need to learn, and you grow from there. But those jumps and those future partnerships, they're always done correctly. And when you do that, you don't lose friends in the industry. You really create a good reputation. And when you leave somewhere, it's amicably, and it's done in the light of day, and no debts left, things like that. But Chris, long-term relationships, to me, I heard somebody say one time that a definition of discipline is remembering what it is that you want. And I want the foundation of the relationships that I have with people, and whether they're in my organization or not, I have a lot of relationships with people outside my organization. And I want just as much of a long-term relationship with them as I do people in my organization, but I want the basis of that relationship. And I feel like, Chris, to answer your question, a key for me in my long-term relationships is that we're growing through life together. It's not just your production. These people that have performance-based love, that's not love at all. And I think that really creates incredible friction. And so, having a true love for people, and loving people, even when they may be going through the hardest times of their business life, but realizing that it's an individual, realize that individual, when they go home, their business is not all they are. It's not all that, it's not all they, it's so you're really growing with them, and you're constantly doing what that definition of discipline is. You're helping them, you're reminding them what it is they want, right? And when you find somebody's true why, I think your little definitions that motivate you always tend to change, but all of those little definitions, Colton and Chris, they all tend to lead to your main why. And if you can remind people what their why is, and you can remind people that they are the greatest miracle in the world, and you can remind people that even on days that they don't feel very powerful, we all battle our feelings, right? And on days they don't feel very powerful, on seasons of ebbs where maybe they get some chargebacks, they're no less powerful than on their best days. And if you can constantly remind people of those things, I think you're building long-term relationships.
Colton, when we were in Dallas for 8% Nation, and we had Ed Milet on stage, not we, but we have watched on stage, he said something, I think it was, you have the capacity for greatness. And I may be butchering that quote, but I'm pretty sure it's correct. And I've literally ended every one of my trainings this week with that phrase, reminding people you have the capacity for greatness. You're fully equipped to be successful. You have everything you need to be successful. Now it's just time to take action. John, I think what a lot of people don't even realize when they get into recruiting and building a business like Joe has done with Insurance Toolkits is you don't just do business. You don't just write premium. You do business and life together, like you just said. When I had a really great flow period last year, was doing 100K a week as an agency, I didn't realize the life part that was going to come with it. Agent that calls me and says, I'm dealing with a divorce and I know you've dealt with that before. What do I do? I'm like, that's not in the training manual. That's not in the agent guide. I can't pull this up in Toolkit. All right, let's talk like human beings. Dealing with debts. A couple months ago, good friend of mine and an assistant to my team was killed in an accident. And I had to reach out to another teammate and say, I need you to take the lead today. I can't. I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be on a plane. The show is yours. Doing life and business together is such an interesting part of what we do. And sometimes you don't realize it until it's taken place. So what is the proper time to make a change? Before we got onto that little emotional trip there, you talked about digging in long term, but also there's a time that it might be appropriate to make a change in business. So can you share some thoughts on that?
Well, I think we're constantly growing, right? And I've seen this industry I've seen this industry be a great starting point for people that have gone on to do great things in other industries. And so when I say, proper time to leave, I mean, obviously there's, proper time certainly to make changes inside the industry. But there's also proper times for you to launch into other things that God's got in store for you. And I just know that when it's the right time, it's a peaceful transition. And so now when I say peaceful transition, I'm not saying that the people that you're leaving, I'm not saying that initially they understand and initially everything feels good, but the way you leave, at some point in time, you really do appreciate the character of that person. So I just feel like when it's the right time.
Yeah, I don't appreciate the character of people that leave me money because that takes capital out of investing into the right people. And, you throw a rock into a river and there's all those streams that come from it. $6,000 of debt might not hurt you, but it might hurt your ability to pour into a new agent who needs a start. So life is all about what you do and the reputation that you build. Talk to us about work-life balance. We're not all what we do. We are real people behind it. I think that's lyrics from a Switchfoot song. Don't quote me on it. But talk to us about a work-life balance? Because you've also made enough money, you probably don't even need to work, but you still work just as hard as the day when you started. So work-life balance.
Well, I was actually telling a group of people the other day that I probably am not really good person to talk on that. Because, my son's in the business now, and I find myself coaching and teaching him to, and my pastor calls it soul care, right? You got to take time off. You've got to recharge your batteries. And I just really feel like, Chris, I didn't do a great job of that. I feel like my work-life balance was, I needed to make sure Kim and my family were on safe ground. Okay. And that was my job. And so that was my work-life balance. Now, I can say that, and that's definitely one of those macho business things to say, but I really, you talk about long-term relationships. I find myself, when I get around my elite producers, my people that are really doing great, whether it's just through S quadrant or B quadrant, building an agency, I find myself being more of a pressure release valve than a pressure cooker. You never have to put pressure on a doer. You never have to put pressure on somebody that has an entrepreneur spirit. If anything, your job is to take pressure off of them. Maybe when you get together with them for an hour, you never even talk about business. Talk about other things. Go see a movie together. Go eat popcorn. Throw popcorn at each other. Laugh a little bit, right? So, hopefully that answers your question. But that work-life balance, that is something that I hope to mentor people to do a little bit better than I did.
Colton, I might be the only person ever to take notes on YouTube video that I'm currently filming, but people can sit here for 20 minutes and take millions of dollars and decades of experience away from what we've got at around the 12-minute mark. I mean, I don't know about you. Am I crazy, Colton?
No, and I don't think you're crazy at all, because when you're talking about the work-life balance, it's kind of coming full circle in the sense of earlier we mentioned when we were at 8%, Ed Milet was speaking about the capacity for greatness. The capacity for greatness can otherwise be called your potential. So I think when you have somebody that you bring underneath you and you're trying to show them their capacity for greatness or the potential that they have, when you have, similar to what John was saying, an entrepreneur, you don't have to put pressure on them because they can see their capacity for greatness. They know what their potential is. So it can definitely be a struggle, especially in your first few years as an agent, to have that work-life balance, because when you can recognize the potential you have in this business, it can be really hard to disconnect sometimes and go back to normal life because you know how much that you're trying to accomplish. So I think that all kind of comes full circle, is you have to understand that a work-life balance, your work is not going to be good if your life isn't balanced, So those things kind of go hand in hand, which I think is a great point that you guys were hitting on.
I'll say this too on the work-life balance. I always love for agents that if they have a family, include your family in your business goals. In other words, I know growing up in this business with, my wife, Kim, and our 2 kids, like there was a pride of business ownership. Like our last name stood for business ownership. Our last name didn't stand for job. Our last name didn't stand for, we're going to go work for somebody else's dream. We're going to work for our own dream. We're going to have a pride of business ownership. And you know what? That looks a little bit different sometimes on holidays when you see your other friends going and doing things, or, we really tried to make sure that we taught delayed gratification to our kids and for the purpose of why we were doing it. And so I think a lot of that work-life balance was, it wasn't so much, that I'm going to take a week off now and unplug, or I'm going to do this. I wish I felt like I could do that and succeed at the level that we did. But I never wanted to take my foot off. Yeah, I would take a few days here and there. But man, I was excited about what I was doing. So hopefully that translates to make sense to people.
Yeah, if you're not including your family in your business, then that's probably why your family isn't supporting you in your business. And
Exactly.
if they're not supporting you because you've included them, then you probably shouldn't be. You got a bigger problem.
Yeah.
I remember trying to. First thing I ever said to my girlfriend about the business, you're not going to understand it. It's confusing. There's fancy words. It just don't worry about it. And she took offense to it. She's like, "Why won't you try to explain it to me?" Then I took the time to explain it, and a year and a half later, she's packaging policies to get mailed out and could talk shop just as good as the next person. But I had an agent ask me when we got together once. He asked her, "Does Chris talk about anything outside of insurance when you're together?" Of course he does. He's a human being as well. So having that balance, including your family, gets your family on your side. Next question, since we're in prime time here with 8 minutes to spare, talk about trust in business, because a lot of people can talk a big game, but aren't really trustworthy behind the scenes. Talk about the value of trust in business.
Well, I think there's a speed to trust, right? And that's, part of, of an agent, and my only advice to agents is that they find people. In other words, no matter what IMO, no matter what organization you connect yourself to, find people that you trust, because I'm going to tell you what, it's really hard. It's really hard to succeed in business when you're walking around with your fist up all the time, because you're waiting for the next sucker punch. You're waiting for the next, person to take advantage of you. Life's too short for that. There's a speed to trust. And you hear, like, we're getting into football season. One of the things you hear football coaches talk about a lot is, hey, I want my team running downhill, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, it's the same thing when Chris or Colton says, hey, I want my agents running downhill. Well, what does that mean? That means they're not fearful. They're only focusing on what they need to focus on. And there's a speed to that. Whether somebody just wants to write some policies or whether somebody's building an agency, I call that S quadrant, B quadrant. But there's a speed to people that have trust, and people that are trustworthy. I mean, it's, they've got depth to them, right? They're not the people that, when I talked about a while ago, having performance-based love. These uplines and IMOs that typically only love you when you're doing what's making them money. Yeah, there's that a lot of times leads to not really trusting them.
I told an agent once, I'm not telling you this because I need your override to pay my mortgage. I honestly don't. And if you take offense to that, I don't care. I don't need your money to pay my bills. I need to be honest with you for my integrity. And I need to tell you this because you've trusted me to work with you. And if you don't want to work with me anymore, God bless you. There's plenty of places to do that. But I won't compromise the trust and the honesty. And I'm never going to become dependent on you for you to think that's what our relationships become. We've got 5 minutes left before Zoom cuts us off. What is your biggest passion outside the industry? Because I think it's important to hear about the other side of some of the biggest successes in the industry.
Well, for me, it's I waste most of my time playing golf, right? I love golf. My background before I got involved in business a long time ago was professional golf. And I've just always, I'm a silent competitor. I'm not in your face competitor. But I love competing. I love competing mostly with myself. And so, golf to me gives me that outlet. And so I enjoy that. But as far as my passion outside of the business, it kind of relates to the business, because my passion is to hopefully be a difference maker for people. My prayer every day is that God has his way in my life, and whatever desires I have that aren't good for me, take them away. Because ultimately, I want to make a difference in people's lives. I want to remind them who they are. I think probably one of the best success movies I've ever seen is Wreck-It Ralph. You guys have kids out there, you've probably watched Wreck-It Ralph. And so I just think that there's a whole world out there that never wants you to discover who you really are. And once you discover who you really are, man, it's life tends to start making a lot of sense.
There literally isn't anything else I could ask that would top what we've just put together over the course of the last 25 minutes. Share with those watching today, John, who you are, how they can contact you if they've connected with you today and want to kind of reach out further after this video. We give our guests a chance to promote themselves before we close out the episode.
Well, I'd rather just take the time and promote Agency Toolkit, man. You guys are phenomenal. And if anybody wants to reach me, if they want to go through you guys, you've got my cell phone number, you've got my contacts. They can contact me that way. But I appreciate you guys. Y'all have made such a big difference in all of Equus. And I can speak on behalf of all my brothers and sisters with Equus. I mean, we utilize your service all the time, and it's made a big difference. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. So again, thanks for watching the video. John, thank you for taking the time to record with us today. Like the video, as my kids would say, comment below and subscribe so YouTube will show our content to someone who doesn't even know it exists. And we'll be back next week with another guest for you. Take care.